Morning, everybody. Welcome back. Happy Money Thursday. I'm excited to be here. Cannot wait to see what we have in store, guys. I am ready to crush it today. Give me 1 second. I hear my voice again. I don't know where it's coming from, but it sounds terrible. But yeah, I'm ready to crush it. Super excited to see what opportunity we have for today and keep hitting it hard, guys. I mean, the last 2 days have been a really good couple of days. Start the month of September. You guys have been crushing it. Big time profits. We've been very consistent. Nice little one and dones. Let's see if we get another little one and done today and just make it happen, guys. So let's not waste any time. Let's go ahead and dive into everything. Review the SPY, review the Qs, Tesla, and NVIDIA, and get you guys prepared for today's session. I think we got some nice opportunity out there. All right. So coming on up. Right, we have a couple pieces of data. All right, so here at 9:45, we do have S&P Global Composite PMI data. That's of medium importance. We've seen it, move the market before, so be mindful of that. That's released at 9:45, and then here today we do have ISM Services PMI data. Now that's of high importance, and that's definitely the type of data that the market can react to. Same thing as JOLTS, right? JOLTS data, high importance. Market definitely reacts to it. That's exactly what we saw yesterday, was a nice big drop through JOLTS data. So again, today we have more high important data. 10 o'clock, that's going to be ISM Services PMI. Then you got some light data at 11 o'clock. This is not any kind of like market moving data, so nothing to be too concerned with. And then you're pretty much in the clear for the rest of today, right? So 9:45 and 10 o'clock, we got some data. Be mindful of those two times. All right, but let's go ahead and dissect the SPY and the Qs, talk about what we got going on, where my expectations are for the day, and really how I'm looking to navigate the market, and how I'm looking to take some great trades and make some profits, guys. So first thing that I want to go ahead and do here is always start with the daily and go from there. We're going to go ahead and mark up basically the last two lows of day. So we're going to go ahead and mark up Tuesday's low of day. We're going to go ahead and mark up Wednesday's low of day. And it also lines up with the gap up open from Tuesday, August 15th. And so that's that main area that we've just been grinding this entire week, right? Tuesday's low of day. We grind that level yesterday in pre-market. Yesterday's low of day. Post-market low. Pre-market low. We are grinding that level of support. That is going to be our line in the sand for today. That's our lits, okay? Because if we fall below that level, we know that we can come down to the top end of the gap, right? Now, if you're running your gap level from body to body, you're holding the top end of the gap, okay? So if you fall inside the gap, where's the first area to the downside that you would expect to bounce? Probably off that low of day. So with that all being said, I'm just going to go ahead and create my gap off that candle's low of day, right? And look at that as being the main gap level. So if I'm looking to get short for a gap fill short, I want to see it below that 548.92 because that also puts us below that 50 SMA. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just run a level of support up against those areas we just discussed. That's between 549.46 to 549.51. That's going to be my line in the sand for today. If we fall below it, I expect us to come down to the top end of the gap near the 50 SMA. That's at 548.92. And then from there, probably get some kind of a bounce. There probably will be a little bit of a bounce off that level before maybe cracking it and setting up to the short side. So I definitely want to keep that 548.92 area on watch. It's up against the daily 50 SMA as well. And that's an area that we may see a little bit of a bounce. Okay, and then go ahead and mark up the bottom end of your gap as well. And it's going to be off the high a day prior to that gap up. So that candle's high a day is at 544.94. And then lastly, that zone that we discussed yesterday is still a key valid zone of resistance. That's up between 554.73 to 555.07. Okay, so these are the main key levels that I really want to be looking at today. Okay, so let's go ahead and build some plans, right? I really want to see if the SPY can open and come down into that line in the sand before pushing on up. All right, I would really love to see the SPY down at that level. And really one of two things are going to happen. We're going to come down into that line in the sand. We're going to hit it for the 7th time, and we're going to hold it as support. And we may see a nice bounce off that level again. So if we come down into that line in the sand zone and we hold it on up as support today, I'm looking to get long, expecting that we get some upside. Where to? I still think realistically, the SPY has potential to get up towards around that 554.73 to 555.07. And honestly, I think that we get up into that level prior to seeing any more downside. Could be wrong, right? We may just flush and fill the gap today. And if so, we'll take advantage of that. But if we hold that line in the sand, and if we do see that bounce, I think it's realistic that we come up and back test this area of resistance before we see that daily lower high and before we start to really see that next leg down. Not just because it's a pretty key level of daily resistance, but if we take a fib extension on this move, it actually lines up with one of those extension levels. So it just makes a lot of sense to come up and back test all of that previous support as resistance, put in that daily lower high, then we start to see that next leg down. So that would be my target to the long side, would be that zone of resistance. So game plan number one, again, is going to be coming down into that line in the sand. If we hold it to support, I'm looking to get long. Where to? Our next daily key zone of resistance. That's plan number one. Game plan number two is going to be if we crack that line in the sand and if we come down into the top end of the gap at 548.92, right? And if we hold that level on up, I would look to get long, right? And I would want to see it bounce off that top gap level, back above that line in the sand, then regain it as support, and then start to push higher from there, right? That would be the ideal scenario to see the SPY play on out. So that's going to be like game plan number two. If we crack that line in the sand, I'll wait for the SPY to come down to the top end of that gap at 548.92. And if it appears that we're going to hold it on up and I see a reason to take that long, I would take it long. First target would have to be the line in the sand level. So, I mean, you're pretty limited to the upside. You might be able to get 50 to 60 cents. But the ideal scenario would be snapping back above that level, regaining it with a higher low, and then be able to push off that level with an intraday higher low and actually get some follow through out of that, you know, potential long opportunity off the top end of the gap. So that's going to be the second plan for today. And then the third and final plan for the day is if we crack that line in the sand, we fall below that daily 50 SMA, and if we fall inside of this daily gap, I'm going to be looking for a retest off the top end of that gap as intraday resistance. And if that's what we see setting up and taking place, then I feel pretty confident to get short for a daily gap fill. And I would short this down to the bottom end of that gap at 544.94 on the SPY. So those are going to be the three game plans for today. And the fourth plan is it never comes down into these levels of support. It never gives us an opportunity to take a trade. We open and we just start to rip on up. If that's what we see, I will be hands off until the SPY gets up into that next key zone of resistance between 554.73 to 555.07. Then I'll be looking to see, are we setting up to the short side off that top level of resistance? That will be game plan number 4. All right, guys. That's the plan today for the SPY. Now let's go take a look at the Qs real quick, talk about what we got going on, right? QQQ, we do have this line in the sand right here between 458.41 to 458.68. That's going to be your line in the sand for today. Go ahead and mark up yesterday's high a day as well. That's going to be at 464.51. And then that daily zone of resistance that we were talking about yesterday is still a valid daily zone of resistance for today. That's up between 467.89 to 468.43. And then lastly, we still have that daily gap to the downside. So that daily gap is down at 454.44 up to 455.75. Okay? So again, my two game plans to start the day on the Qs are going to be based on the line in the sand. Okay, so if the Qs open above that line in the sand level, if we pull back into it and hold it to support, I'm looking to get long into yesterday's high a day, first target, and then second target would be that daily zone of resistance up around 468. The game plan number one, if we hold that line in the sand as support. Now, if we open above that level, which it appears we will, and if we crack below it, come back up and retest it as resistance from there, I'm looking to get short. Where to? Top into the gap. That'll be PT number one at 455.75. And then final target would be the bottom end of this daily gap at 454.44. That's game plan number two. And then finally, game plan number three is if we ever see the Qs filling the gap today, maybe we can look for an opportunity to get long for a gap fill bounce, right? Down at 454.44. If we get there, could look for that gap fill bounce. That would be game plan and trade idea number three for today on QQQ. Now, I like the Qs a lot more, to be completely honest with you, right? Because if we hold that level as support, a lot of great upside. If we crack below that level, retest it as resistance, there's some decent downside. And we're opening very, very close to that key level on QQQ. So I like the upside potential we have off that level. I like the potential downside we have off that level. When I look at this SPY, right, I like the upside potential off that key zone, that line in the sand. But if we crack and hold below it, there's just going to be limited downside into the top end of the gap. So just really looking at the two and assessing them side by side, I like the Qs just a little bit more than the SPY for today. So most of my focus is going to go here on QQQ right at market open, guys. All right. Other than that, I'm watching NVIDIA here at this key zone of support between 103.50 to 104.18. Now, if we see NVIDIA cracking below that key zone of daily support, and if we retest it as resistance, I would look to get short down to $100 here on NVIDIA today. So it's that simple. It really just comes down to that zone of support here on NVIDIA. If we crack below it, retest it as intraday resistance, I would entertain a short down to psychological support of $100. Easy peasy. That's the plan for NVIDIA. So that zone again is 103.50 to 104.18. And the only opportunity that I see for today is the potential crack and retest off that daily zone to get short down to $100. All right, so that's where my head is with NVIDIA. Let's keep that one on watch here. And then Tesla, I don't really like Tesla now. I was thinking we had some opportunity to open close to this 222 zone of support. Right now, we're near like 225, so I don't even know if I would want to see it crack this zone that we're holding above and then come down into that lower zone. That just wouldn't look good. I was kind of thinking we were going to be opening near this lower zone, and then I could take it long into that first zone of resistance, but we're already going to be opening above it. So if we crack below it into the zone, I just don't know how confident I would be to still take that long on Tesla. So with all that being said, I'm going to just back burner Tesla and put most of my focus on the SPY, the Qs, and NVIDIA for today. All right, guys. But I'm sure there's something that you guys are looking at. Guarantee it. Let's take a look at your stocks for the day. Let's take this time to get you guys prepared and see what we have. What are you guys looking at today? Anybody got anything else you guys are looking at? I'm sure someone's looking at something else besides the SPY, the Qs, and NVIDIA. Anything that's standing out to you guys?
Hey Josh, I'm on ES right now. I'm not gonna trade it or nothing, but can I at least give you my area of resistance on the daily? Maybe I'd see if,
On ES?
yes.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
I got 5580.50 to 5564 as an area of resistance for the daily on the daily.
Okay. So it looks like you're running a zone maybe right through this region here.
Correct.
So that's 5576 to like 5586 is the area that I've marked up, and I could readjust that a little bit if I wanted to, but that
Okay.
to me seems to be the most respected and most validated area right here between 5576 up to 5588 here
Oh,
on
so,
ES, because I
so I'm
see we came up and hit it here, got rejected, hit it here, got rejected, held at the support here with a low a day, high day rejection, and then got back above it and held at the support here several times.
okay. Cool. So I wasn't that off then.
No, you're definitely in the ballpark for sure. You're definitely right there. And then as far as support goes, I mean, there's a lot of support here between 55.11 and like 55.17 here on ES. I mean, we have all of this previous support that we grinded for like 2 weeks, got below it, grinded it as resistance 4 days back to back. And then here just this week, we've come down and hit it once, bounced, hit it twice, bounced. Today, the third time, hitting it again. But see that bounce up into that level of resistance here on ES. Last thing that I would do here, man, is run a fib extension from the swing high into the swing low and get an idea of where those fib extension levels are at. And you could utilize those as some overhead areas of resistance and some profit-taking levels. And would you look at that, man, that zone of resistance overhead is right up against the 50% level. So, again, I said the same thing on the SPY. It's like, I think it's realistic to see the SPY get back up into this zone of resistance. It's also in line with that fib extension, and I think that's a very realistic area to see the SPY get to before we even see it top out and possibly start to roll. We look at that, and then we look at ES, it's pretty much the same thing. Right? We're expecting it to come back up into all this resistance before possibly topping on out, rolling on over to see the second leg to the downside. And that zone of key resistance is in line with that 50% retracement. So I think there's a realistic potential to see ES, and the SPY, push off these lower levels of support, get up into this top region of resistance up against that 50% extension. And then that's a key area that I want to keep on watch the rest of this week into next week to see if there's a reason to get short up against all that resistance for a nice little swing trade.
Cool. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, man. Absolutely.
Could you explain your line in the sand for Qs? Because I did not have that zone, so I'm trying to understand it again, if it's possible.
Yeah, so basically I just looked at yesterday's close, right? And I looked left and I lined it up with this low of day here from August 14th before we had a big push end of day. And then we gapped up the next day and then ripped to the upside. So really it's, just a light area that I'm looking at because it's like the most recent area of any support that we have down at these lower levels. Because if I take that level away, the next main area of support that I have is down at that lower gap.
That's the one I have it.
So I'm like, okay, what's in between these areas, right? I got some key lower support and I got some resistance overhead, but is there anything else at all in this region that I should be paying attention to? And I'm like, well, let me just look at, the previous day's low and close. And let's start there as a reference and then go back and see, do we have any levels that we can base any kind of trade off of? And so that's when I'm like, you know what? Let's look at yesterday's low of day and look left. Is there going to be anything here that lines up? I don't really see any other solid touch point off yesterday's low of day. But if I look at yesterday's close and then I look left, I'm like, well, you know what? Yeah, we have that low a day here, right? And that was the low a day that we had from August 14th before we saw a really nice rebound towards the end of the day. And so much buying pressure towards the end of the day to push this up caused a gap up the next day. And we ripped from there. So that makes sense. Looking at that candle's low of day and it's in line with yesterday's open. I'm like, that's a decent little reference point. Let's go into a 5-minute and let's see if we can validate that level anymore. And I'm like, you know what? I feel like we can, right? It's the same area that we grinded in pre-market yesterday. It's where we saw a nice little push before we had that big explosive move to the upside. And we see that it is respecting that level again today, this morning, right? We cracked below it, but instantaneously did what? Snapped back above it, put in a higher low, and now we're starting to grind a little bit. So I like the price development just over the last couple of days off that zone of support. And so that's why I'm going to label that my line in the sand, right? Because if we crack below that level, right, where's the next area of support? It's going to be way down here at that lower gap. And so there's this big opening, and I can short to the downside into that lower gap, and there's a lot of potential to make some nice money, in this region. But if we hold that level of support, right, we know that there's a lot of great upside, at least into yesterday's high a day. So I'm going to label that my line in the sand because that's going to be the make or break. If we hold that level, I see upside. If we crack that level, I see more downside. So I think that's going to be the make or break level. If we hold above it, I think we see upside. If we fall below it, I think we see more downside. So that's why I'm going to label that area my line in the sand for today.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We have about 8 minutes till the market open, guys. Do we have any other questions before we start our day? Or any stocks that you guys want to take a look at? We have plenty of time to analyze some of your stocks, build some plans, and really help you guys get prepared. AVGO. They got earnings coming up today. I don't like what I see here on the daily low. I actually see a little bit more downside with AVGO. We fell below the 20 EMA. We fell below the 50 SMA. That was an area of support that we were trying to hold. We cracked below it. Now we could retest it as resistance. It's also where the 20 EMA is and the 50 SMA. And then you could put a downtrend right here as well on AVGO, and that just gives you another barrier of resistance right around like 159, right? Daily area of resistance, 50 SMA, 20 EMA, and that daily downtrend. So, I mean, I don't see any reason to get long here on AVGO. If anything, I would be looking for a short up around like 159. But with earnings tonight, I wouldn't get short today and swing this through earnings, personally. Unless there's an opportunity to take the short today as a day trade, you can secure, a majority of your profits, get your initial investment back out, and then maybe have, 20% of your position as a runner to hold that runner risk-free through earnings just to see what happens. I mean, that's an approach. That's a way to get involved with an earnings play on AVGO without being exposed to a lot of risk. Find the opportunity to day trade this, if there is one. If you can get all your initial investment back out and still have partial position left over to hold it through earnings with no risk, hey, I see the short opportunity. I see the potential. And maybe earnings is the catalyst that really helps this thing pull back towards around the 136s.
Hey, Josh, Stir posted a nice chart 2 days ago under options and market mastery on AVGO.
A to the V to the G to the O. Where are you at? Okay.
So that's something else to take a look at into your different supply and demand zones.
Yeah, I see he's got a little demand zone near like 146 into the 151s, which that's where you're kind of pulling into the last couple of days. You're starting to push on out. And then I see he's got some demand up there around that 160 area. And I'm looking at that daily zone of resistance right around like 159.40. So that's pretty close, pretty in line with that level.
Right.
None of those are overlapping, though. I wouldn't take anything for pre-earnings play until we get to an overlapping size.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't take this through earnings, period. The only way that I would even hold something through earnings is if that day trade opportunity set up, I took it, I locked in my profits, got my initial back out, and now I have a runner risk-free. Cool, I'll take it through earnings. I can't risk anything. But just getting involved in something, just to blindly hold it through earnings, I'm okay. I would pass. But yeah, I would watch AVGO back up against, you know, that 159, 159.50 area of resistance. That's where your 50 SMA as well. Your 20 EMA sitting right there on the daily, and you have that daily downtrend that lines up with those other areas to the penny. So if we get there, we get rejected, that could be an area that you look for a nice short for a nice little day trade on AVGO.
Yeah, so for AVGO and DocuSign, I'd be very careful about potential day trades with the implied volatility crush and them both releasing earnings afterwards. I wouldn't enter either unless they were in supply or demand. And personally, because it's earnings, I wouldn't enter either for a day trade, potential swing trade, unless they're overlapping ZAs personally.
Yeah, we were talking about both of those the other day.
Does anybody have anything else? We got about, what, 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Do I see any bull flags? I have trained my mind to not see bull flags, bear flags, cup and handles. I've just trained my mind to not even think or see those things in the market. I don't trade based on retail formations like bull flags, bear flags, cup and handles. Nope. Right, so all eyes for me. I'm going to be here on QQQ at the start of the day. We're going to be opening right at that key zone between 458.40 to 458.66. Depending on what happens off that level, I think we could have a trade right around market open, depending on what happens. Again, if we hold it as support, I'm going to get long. If we crack below it, retest it as resistance, I'm going to get short. We can look at Meta real quick. You got this multi-day downtrend on Meta. Just run a downtrend across those lower highs here. We can clearly see there's going to be a boatload of resistance in this region here on Meta between like 514.89 to 515.86. That's also where the 20 EMA is sitting. I mean, we came into that level and just grinded it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days. Cracked it, just saw a retest yesterday off that zone. That would be a pretty key area for me, that if we can't break above that 514.89 to 515.86 region, and we get rejected off all that resistance, I believe we come back down towards around 505. Back into that 50 SMA that we bounced off of yesterday. So that would be the area that I would keep on high watch for a potential short on Meta. 514.89 to 515.86. If we come up to that zone today, we get rejected, see a proper intraday short setting up, I'd entertain a short back down to yesterday's open, right around 505, 506. But we are live. I want to go all eyes on the Qs because we're opening right at our key zone of support, our lits for today, and we'll see if we have any kind of trade setting up off that level here right at market open. But let's have an awesome day, guys. Let's crush it, and let's have some fun as always. You guys are on YouTube. Appreciate you guys tuning in to the rundown. Have a great day. Trade smart, trade safe. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. over on YouTube. Peace out, guys, and I'll see you then.